This is the new 2020 Audi S8. It's fast, it's fun, and of course, it's monstrously luxurious, as it should be, given that this one has a price tag of around $140,000. Today, I'm going to review this S8 and show you what it's all about. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online car auction platform for modern enthusiast cars. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool car from the 1980s, 90s, 2000s, or now, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. We have some amazing stuff currently listed for sale, and you can check out Cars and Bids by clicking the link in the description below to go to carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this S8 from Audi South Coast here in Orange County in Southern California. Audi South Coast, of course, has all of the new Audi models, including the new S8, which has just gone on sale as the high-performance companion to the newly redesigned A8 full-size luxury sedan. Now, the Audi A8 originally came out almost 25 years ago, and a high-performance S8 model soon followed. Back then, the S8 had 360 horsepower, and oh how times have changed. This new S8 has a twin-turbo V8 that makes 560 horsepower and about 600 pound-feet of torque, which enables this car to go from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds in a massive, giant, full-size luxury sedan. That's impressive, and it's a huge boost over the regular A8. For context, the S8 has as much power as a standard A8 plus a base model A4 plus 40. It also comes standard with all-wheel drive and comes standard with big pricing. The S8 starts around $130,000. This one has a few options that bring the sticker price to around $140,000 with shipping. And today, I'm going to review it. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the new S8, and I'm going to show you all of the quirks and features of the latest flagship Audi high-performance luxury sedan. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the new S8 by discussing what happens when you approach it, because there's a lot of cool stuff with this car before you even get inside. First off, you walk up, unlock the doors, and you can see the headlight does this little dance to kind of say to you, yes, you're my owner, I'm happy to see you, welcome back. I really like that, but it's even cooler in the back. You walk up to the S8 from the back and unlock it, and the taillights do this really cool dance that really emphasizes, hey, this is something special, welcome to your car, that sort of thing. I love how that looks. And it's the same deal in back when you lock it. Lock the S8 and they do a dance to kind of turn off as well. Again, a really, really neat look. A lot of cars are starting to do this, but Audi has the most exciting light dances when you approach. But the dancing lights are not the most interesting thing that happens when you try to get into the new S8. That honor goes to the doors. When you open the door, the car raises up. Check this out. The entire car goes up. Take another look. I'm now approaching the car from the driver's side. You can see I open the door and the car raises up. And you can see from another angle, open up the door, and again, the car raises up to greet you, basically to make it easier for you to get inside. Now, when you close the door, you're walking away from the car. After a little while, you will notice the car will lower back down to its normal ride height so it doesn't just sit here raised up. You'll see it in a second. Now, this is a pretty cool idea because, as you know, everybody wants SUVs. They come into the showroom, they see the new S8, and they think, yeah, it's cool, but it's hard to get in and out of a sedan. Well, an Audi salesperson says, it's not that hard. Check this out. And then the car raises up and they can see that getting in doesn't have to be difficult. And we're still not done with the cool stuff that happens when you approach the new S8. You open the door and Take a look at the seatbelt buckle. It's lighted around the edges so you know where it is. How many times have you gotten in a car and fumbled around at night trying to see where you latched your seatbelt? In the new S8, it's lighted up when you get in to make it easier, and you can avoid that problem. That is a pretty cool idea. And speaking of lighting, there are a lot of cool lighting related tricks in here. One is on the side of the center console. You can see this thin strip of ambient light that goes all the way down on the driver's side and over on the passenger side. There's also a cool thin strip of ambient lighting on the ceiling near the rear view mirror. You can see it goes around all these ceiling controls and looks really good and enhances the mood. And of course, you can change the color of the ambient lighting in the infotainment screen. Speaking of the ceiling controls, here's another cool lighting related item. If you press the button marked rear with the light on it, it will turn on the rear lights, but not just that. It also changes the color of the rear ambient light to white to provide better illumination. So it really lights up the back there in case your rear passenger is trying to read or find something they dropped or something like that. But to me, probably the coolest piece of lighting in here is the ambient light strip on the dashboard. You can see this thin little strip that goes all the way across, and then it continues into the door panel like one continuous unbroken line of light. It is a very cool look, and you have it here pretty much every time you're driving this car at night to set the mood. Now, speaking of the dashboard, something interesting worth mentioning here. You look at the dashboard right now, the car is off, and you can see there are no climate control vents. You just have this clean dashboard look. So what's that about? Well, the climate vents are closed until you turn on the climate control. Turn it on and the vents all open up and reveal themselves. The theory here is if you don't want the climate control on, you get a better looking dashboard without having to stare at the ugly vents that aren't currently active. So these vent covers go up and down depending on whether you have the climate control on. That is cool. And here's another cool climate control related thing. In your car, you probably have a little plastic wheel that you move to close or open the vents, depending on whether you want air to come out. In this car, it's electronic. There's a little electronic pad next to each vent, and you just tap how much airflow you want to go through that vent, less or more, tap, 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 and you can do that for all the vents. No ugly plastic wheels in here. Also pretty cool, until it breaks. And speaking of cool electronic stuff in here, one of the most interesting and unnecessary items I have ever seen in a car is the headlight controls. You can see right now the headlight controls just look like normal headlight controls, but they're actually dimmer than they should be. If you move your hand near the headlight controls, they sense your hand's presence and brighten to illuminate to show you what control options you have. You don't actually have to touch them for them to brighten. They just have a sensor that says, hey, there's a hand nearby. We should show it what we're all about. Now, you pull your hand away and eventually the headlight controls dim again, I guess so that they're not distracting and so they're only bright when you're actually going to use them. This is completely unnecessary, and I'm sure it wasn't cheap to implement, but it does give you an idea of the level of attention to detail in some of these modern luxury cars, and particularly the S8. Proximity sensors for the brightness on the headlight dial. And by the way, in the vicinity of the headlight dial, since we're talking electronic stuff, might as well mention the door handles. You can see the look of the door handle is rather unusual, and it's not a traditional door handle, it's electronic. You pull the door handle just a little bit, and it electronically pops open the door, and then you push it the rest of the way to climb out. Not a typical mechanical door handle. And since we're talking technology, let's cover some of this car's interesting and rather quirky tech features. I want to start with the virtual cockpit system, which is what Audi calls their gauge cluster screen. This remains the best of these systems in the whole car industry because it's fully configurable. You can do whatever you want with it. There are two available view options. One puts the tachometer right in the middle, so that's what you see in your performance car. But I personally prefer the other view, which provides far more information. You can have it show basically anything you want, the music you're listening to, your settings, or this giant map, which can take up basically the entire screen and kind of minimize the rest of the stuff, showing you only what you need. Now, the benefit here is that if you have the map directly in front of you and you're navigating somewhere, you don't have to take your eyes as far off the road to look into the center because it's right in front of you, and it frees up the center screen for you to use for other purposes, like changing the radio station or looking at various vehicle settings or configurations. And speaking of the center infotainment screen, you actually have two of them, an upper screen and a lower screen. Now, I covered this system in depth in my review reviews of the new Audi Q8 and the e-tron, so I'm not going to go through everything here, but I will link those below if you want to check it out. Instead, I'm just going to cover some of the rather quirky features of the infotainment screen, starting with navigation destination entry. Check this out. You can write your navigation destination into these screens. The lower screen becomes a writing pad, and unlike a lot of these systems, you don't have to go one letter at a time. You can write out full place names, full street addresses all at once, and the system is really, really good about figuring out what you've written. So you basically have like a notepad here to write your destinations rather than trying to type it all on some little keyboard or go letter by letter writing it like in other cars. And next up, another fun infotainment quirk is in the sound settings. One is tremendously annoying. Take a listen.
Announcement volume. Announcement volume. Announcement volume. Announcement volume. Announcement volume. Announcement volume.
Announcement volume. Announcement volume. Announcement volume. The other sound setting in here I actually like better. This is the welcome sound, which is the sound you can configure to play when you first get into your car. It sounds like this. Now, if you turn that on, every time you climb into the S8 and turn it on, and I think turn it off, that sound plays just to let you know something magical is happening. I love it. But undoubtedly, the most interesting quirk in the infotainment system is the fragrances. In your car, you turn on your climate system to blow air. In this car, you turn on the climate control system and it blows air along with a scent. You press this little button and you can turn on a fragrance that blows through your climate vents every time you turn on the climate control to make your interior smell a little nicer and a little fresher. Now, the interesting thing is the fragrance is configurable and you have two options: summer or winter. What does winter smell like? Well, you'd find out if you owned a new Audi S8. You can also change the intensity of the fragrance. You can have 4 different levels of fragrance intensity in your 560 horsepower super sedan. Now, as for the lower screen, it mainly controls your climate controls. It has a few other little functions, but that's mostly what it's there for, and it's fairly straightforward how it operates, although it is worth noting that for the temperature, you don't have to go degree by degree to change it. You can kind of slide your finger and then change it in larger numbers if you want to go from cold to hot. Otherwise, fairly standard temperature controls, just in this car, they've been integrated into a screen rather than physical buttons like most others. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the new S8, which is of course huge. It is wonderfully roomy and comfortable back here, and I love it. There are of course several interesting quirks and features, as you might expect. One is in this center console, which comes down if you don't have a middle passenger. You can see at the top of this center console, there's this little black pad, which doesn't appear to have a purpose. But when the car is on, everything in here lights up, and these are your rear climate controls. And you can see that changing everything is kind of cool. You just slide your finger up and down these little bars to change your rear seat climate temperature or the fan speed back here. And it's very nice and very easy to use for your rear seat climate control system. And speaking of electronic controls for the rear seat climate control, on the vents themselves, you have the same little electronic touchpad sliders that can limit or increase your airflow. You just tap and you can change how much air comes out of the vents. Unfortunately, back here, the vents don't close like they do up front, but these little electronic pads are still a cool thing to see carried into the back seat. And next up, another cool feature back here, you have mirrors that come down from the ceiling. You push this little tab and then the mirror falls. This is pretty common in luxury cars, although this is kind of the largest and most luxurious mirror assembly I remember seeing. But you have mirrors back here where you can look at yourself as you're being driven around. And next up, another nice feature back here. Just like in front, you have a button in back that can turn on all of your rear lights. It's on the ceiling, you press it, and again, all of your ambient lights suddenly turn white and more lights come on to illuminate the back in case you're reading something back here and you need to see a little bit better. It's just nice to see all the lights working together at once to make that happen. And speaking of buttons you have back here, on the door panel you can see there are quite a few, more than your typical single rear window button. So here's what they do. First off, the 2 at the top are for the rear windows. Each passenger has a control for their own rear window and the rear window on the other other side. You also have a control for the rear sunshade, which provides shade in the back window. That's pretty common in most luxury sedans. The other two items are a little less common. One is for the rear sunroof sunshade. You can open or close this sunshade depending on how much light you want to get through or how much darkness you want to be shrouded in. The other one opens and closes the front sunroof. So this little switch, you can open the front sunshade and the front sunroof from the back seats, which is pretty unusual. This isn't maybe a car you want to take your kids around in, because that would get annoying very fast. Your kids opening your sunroof from the back seat. And next we move outside the new S8 to one of my very favorite things about this car, and that is how it looks. I am constantly complaining that modern AMG and BMW M cars are just too showy, too outrageous, whereas they used to be subtle and you had to know what you were looking at before it took off at a stoplight. Well, the new S8 is still subtle. This just looks like a big sedan, and you would never know that it has 560 horsepower under the hood. I love how subtle and relatively restrained this car is, especially in today's era of, look at me, gold brake calipers and M badges everywhere. This thing is not like that at all, and I love it. And speaking of the outside of this car, another thing I love goes back to the lighting. That would be the turn signals. The front turn signal is very cool. You can see it lights up gradually. It almost looks like one of those construction zone signs that lets you know it's time to move over. And I think that is a really cool look on the road, very distinctive for this car. And next up, since I'm around front, we move under the hood. You can see this car's twin turbo V8, or at least you can see a plastic cover over it. Like I mentioned, 560 horsepower, 600 pound-feet of torque, all-wheel drive. This car does 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, which is supercar territory only a few years ago. Now you're doing it in a big luxury sedan. It is a really impressive power plant and some impressive numbers. But the thing I like most under here is actually the warning label for the headlights, because this car has laser headlights. So there's this warning label on top that says, complies with FDA performance standards for laser products. That's just cool. It also says, laser radiation, do not stare into beam. What a cool warning label. It tells you that it's a laser and it has all these cool laser warnings. And I just think that's awesome. The benefit of laser headlights, of course, is they just illuminate more, they go farther. They're the next step in headlight technology beyond xenons and then LEDs. And next up, we move around back in the new S8, where there are a couple of quirks worth noting. One is the rear turn signals, which also have a cool kind of sweeping look, although that little sweeping turn signal is accompanied by a more standard kind of bright bulb that lights up each time to comply with stupid government regulations. I've mentioned this before in previous videos, so I won't get into it, but you do have a pretty cool turn signal look back here. Now, you also have a trunk back here, of course. You can open it up, and then you can see inside, and it is a fairly large trunk, as you might expect for a fairly large vehicle. Nothing particularly interesting or quirky or unusual in the trunk. The other item worth noting around back, though, is the exhaust note, which, as you can imagine for a car like this, sounds pretty good. Take a listen. And so those are the quirks and features of the new Audi S8. And now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new S8. First thing you notice when you get in here, very quiet, very luxurious, feels like a luxury car. Even though this is the performance version, you don't have to make those kind of compromises anymore. You can still have the performance version, but still have a nice quiet. And this is in dynamic mode, and it's still nice and quiet. And it really is quiet. I'm now in traffic here. I can't really open it up, and boy, I mean, this thing just glides. It's like the luxury sedan that you would expect that it is. One of my problems with the previous generation A8, in fact, my biggest problem was it just never felt that special. Driving it around, it did not have like the presence or the bank vault style feel of an S-Class. It just didn't. And this car has improved upon that, there's no doubt about it. It feels nicer to drive, it feels more substantial, and it insulates you from the outside a little bit more. The old one really just felt like a big A4, and I was never into it. All right, gonna give it a little gas here. Oh yeah. Oh, wow. that is strong. It certainly doesn't have the sound of an AMG S-Class, nor the power. It doesn't quite feel as fast, but it feels pretty quick, and it also kind of, it's subtle about it, just like the styling. It doesn't hit you with the sound, it doesn't hit you with the performance, but it just kind of goes. I like it, and it definitely does feel quick. There's no question about that. Good kickdown. Transmission kicks down very quickly, and you do feel the power immediately. There's no delay here, despite the fact that this is a turbocharged engine. This is a great power plant. I've reviewed it in many other cars from Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche, the whole group. In terms of handling and steering, it still doesn't quite have that S-Class bank vault feel. A8s they just don't. The steering just feels lighter and less important somehow. Like an S-Class, it feels like you're really turning this big, solid ship, and it just doesn't quite feel like that in the A8 S8. But this car is powerful and insulated from the road and very comfortable. It has all of those hallmarks of a luxury car. And at $140,000 with decent options, this is way cheaper than an S63 AMG, although it's also less powerful and a little bit slower. I do like the idea of this car, though. You're just driving around in an Audi sedan. It kind of looks like the smaller Audi sedans. They haven't done anything to make it look that sporty or performance-y. For a lot of people, this will be a drawback, but for me, I just envision cruising down the highway in the middle of the country, going fast, just subtle, and everybody sees you in your black Audi, and they're just like, huh, that guy's going somewhere. And I feel like cars like the AMG S-Class, the Panamera, they're just a little more shouty, a little more attention-seeking. This one is super subtle, but it still has the performance that you would want. Overall, I do like this car. It has good technology, everything in here is really nice, and there's some cool little neat touches, like the lighting stuff when you approach it, the ambient lighting inside. There are some neat tricks to this car that kind of make it stand out. It's a nice interior, it's a nice car, it drives well, it's comfortable, everything about it is great.
And so that's the 2020 Audi S8. Big sedans are no longer as popular as they once were, with expanding interest in SUVs. But if you want the ultimate modern big sedan, this might just be it. It's fast, it's loaded with tech, and it just looks boss. Of course, you'll pay big money for this car, but that's no surprise considering everything that it offers. And with that in mind, now it's time to give the new S8 a Doug score.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the new S8 looks nice, not over the top beautiful, but wonderfully subtle, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Handling is fine for a car like this, lively, but not quite Panamera lively, still it gets a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is good, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Cool factor is okay, it's the cool, new, hot Audi sedan, but it's not exactly head-turning, and it gets a 5 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 30 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. This S8 is absolutely loaded and it gets a 9 out of 10. Comfort is fine and it gets an 8 out of 10. Quality is excellent and it gets an 8 out of 10. Practicality is normal for a car like this and it gets a 5 out of 10. Value is okay. It's got a lot of equipment even for the money compared to rivals like the S63 AMG, but it's a very expensive luxury sedan that's going to lose value fast. It gets a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 36 out of 50. Added up in the Doug score is 66 out of 100, which places it here against some other luxury sedans and luxury performance sedans. The S8 does well. It's no Panamera Turbo or Mercedes GT63 four-door, but it's fun to drive and well equipped, and it's a good choice if you're looking for a luxury performance sedan.